Our next storyteller, although definitely in that stage we call midlife, Andrea is still trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life. And she will probably be until she dies. She's lived in Tucson long enough to feel at home here in the desert, but still feels the call of the wild and may someday move on. But for now, she's delighted to be here and be part of the FST community, and we are delighted to have her back to the stage after a little bit of a hiatus. So please welcome back to the Fisterhood here, Andrea.
Okay, so due to technical miscommunication, I will be reading this off my phone tonight, so please be patient with me as I try to make sure the screen doesn't go dark. It happens, it happens. On an ordinary Thursday in February 2017, I found myself looking for something to do that would get me out of my house, because spending too much time by myself in my house is not very good for my mental health. I didn't want to sit at home alone another night. So the Book of Face suggested something called the Women's Comedy Festival at a place called the Tucson Improv Movement, often referred to as TIM. I decided to check it out. I'd never really gotten into comedy, but I definitely like doing things that support women's voices. So I headed out, not knowing that that evening would have a butterfly effect that continues to ripple through my life to this day. I settled into my seat at the theater, which was located at that time on 7th Street, just next to the pinball parlor behind Antigone Books. Seemed like a pretty low-key location, what with the theater being located behind some garage doors directly off the street. A guy named Kurt welcomed me outside on the sidewalk where there was a podium that seemed to function as a ticket booth. And the stage was a raised platform along one side of what was basically a garage. Okay. Now, the show I had come for was by this group called Female Storytellers. Okay, sounded interesting enough. I'd never encountered storytelling as a performance art before, but, let's check it out. I quickly became totally engaged. The stories were both funny and poignant, and I found myself thinking, wow, what would it be like to share one's stories in front of an audience? Now, I'd never been one to get in front of people in any capacity. I was reserved and timid and always felt like I was better off doing stuff behind the scenes. At the same time, I struggled with a sense of being invisible, and I longed to be seen and heard. I didn't feel worthy of it, though. I wasn't interesting. I wasn't a dynamic person that could inspire or engage people. I was just me, boring old Andrea. What did I have to offer? My stories wouldn't be of interest to anyone. Not to mention that getting in front of a group of people and speaking, much less telling a personal story, was so vulnerable. Are you crazy? No, not me. Not gonna do that. But by that February night, I was well into my own transformational journey. And for once, I thought to myself that maybe, in fact, I do have a story to tell. I'd gone through the process of embracing my identity, coming out to the world and transitioning, all without support, and feeling very isolated in the world. What if, by telling my story, I could help people understand what it's like to be transgender in this society? What if by telling my story, someone else might hear it and know that they were not alone in their own journey. Now, doing so would require a lot of courage, but my transition journey had shown me that I had that. In fact, much more than I gave myself credit for, much more than I still give myself credit for. However, the stories I heard that night were all funny, and I didn't really see any way to make my coming out story funny. It was mostly pretty damn heavy and emotional. So the fish show that night finished, and I had enjoyed it so much that I stayed for the next 2 comedy shows. In fact, I returned for every show of that 3-day festival. They should have given me a prize. I encountered a number of other types of performance, including stand-up and improv. I laughed a lot. I cried maybe a little bit. I also experienced many avenues through which I might share myself with the world. Right away, I decided that if I were going to do this, storytelling seemed the most accessible. While terrifying, it wasn't nearly as terrifying as the thought of doing stand-up or improv. No. But I still couldn't figure out how to tell my story in a humorous way. I reached out to Bethany Evans, the contact that was mentioned at the end of the FIST show. She was a FIST board member at the time and is both a fantastic, outstanding storyteller and comedian in her own right, and I'm sorry she's not here tonight, but Bethany explained to me that the regular FIST show was not necessarily all humorous stories. The ones in the comedy festival had been selected specifically because, well, it's a comedy festival. She invited me to come experience a regular FIST show to experience more of a typical lineup. So I marked my calendar and attended the next month's show. I don't remember the theme, but I do remember that I was further inspired by the stories that evening, and I encouraged by the possibilities this offered for using my voice in the world. I talked with Bethany after the show, and she agreed to meet with me to talk it through further. Her support and encouragement moved me from consideration to action. The next month's show, April 2017, 8 years ago, yes, had the theme Choices. With some help and guidance from Bethany, I wrote out the story of my journey to embrace myself and come out to the world. I submitted it and was both excited and terrified when it was accepted. I, the woman who had never felt confident enough to do any form of public speaking, would be stepping on stage before an audience of strangers and telling one of the most intimate stories I could possibly share. Yikes. So the night of the show arrived. I was 6th in the lineup of 6, which gave me plenty of time to wait and grow increasingly nervous. I am not much of a drinker anyway, and for that event, I definitely wanted all of my wits about me, so that precluded, like, taking the edge off with some drinks. Yeah. At that time, FIST was held at the Flycatcher, may it rest in peace. Yeah, and the room was always packed. It's lovely to see you all here tonight. And there would be packed people sitting on the floor because there weren't enough seats, standing in the back by the bar. As the speaker before me shared her story, I paced in tight circles in the green room alongside the stage. And if you ever saw the stage at Flycatcher, that green room was a broom closet. Finally, the storyteller in front of me finished, and I was introduced. I stepped onto the stage. The butterflies in my stomach were doing acrobatics. They weren't, anyway, you get the idea. I stood before the microphone and I began to share my story. And as I spoke, the warm response of the audience relieved the tension I felt inside me. I felt heard, seen, and uplifted. They accepted and affirmed me for who I am, which is something I feared would never happen when I came out. By the time I finished, I felt elated, As I walked off the stage, I was already thinking about what other stories I could share so I could enjoy that rush of euphoria again. So since then, I have shared 9, now 10 tonight, stories on the FST stage. Thank you. Feels appropriate. April. Yeah. I have spoken at the Flycatcher, at Hotel Congress, Cannes Deli, I don't care if it rests in peace, Crooked Tooth Brewing, and The Rock. I even made it into the 2nd volume of the anthology. Be sure to buy your copy over there tonight. I get 0 benefits, so this is not plugging shamelessly for myself. There's a lot of great stories in here, including mine. Many of my stories have been deeply emotional, and the telling of them has been cathartic for me, and I hope for the audience. I have joked that those who are familiar with my stories know that if Andrea gets on stage, they better grab their tissues because they're going to need them. I think maybe tonight you're safe. We'll see. See where this goes. Through FST, I have come to know some really amazing women, like Mel and Kat and Lee, who didn't make it tonight, and Britt's out there somewhere. There she is. And Eva, who is no longer in Tucson, and many, many others. And Bethany, who will always have a special place in my heart because of the butterfly effect she had on my life. Now, I've also shared stories with Odyssey and other storytelling shows, and you should check them out. But nowhere feels as much at home as the FST stage. But the butterfly effect of that first comedy show continued and continues to ripple through my life. Through FST, I was introduced to an opportunity to try stand-up for the first time. And if I was terrified before that first FST show, oh my God, I was so much more terrified before that first stand-up show. I had to call a friend to talk me down from my level of anxiety. But I did it. And stepping into that fear created a space for me to grow and use my voice to reach even more people as I started performing stand-up comedy. And just 3 years, so 2020, after that first Women's Comedy Festival at TIM, I found myself taking the stage for the 2020 festival, which had been renamed the Cactus Flower Comedy Festival, as a stand-up comic in what was one of the last things I did before the pandemic shut us all down. Talk about coming full circle. But the journey didn't end there. A couple of years ago, I was invited to perform in a stand-up versus improv show at TIM. And like a glutton for punishment, I said, sure, I'll do that. Maybe I have a problem, I don't know. But what I discovered is that improv is way more fun than stand-up. It's really fun. And so I now perform regularly in improv shows over at TIM. And they offer classes. You should check it out. Now, none of this would have happened had it not been for that moment in which I decided to attend that first show in 2017. I had no idea that evening that I was opening the door to a journey that would expand and transform my life in ways I never could have considered. So I shared this, both as a celebration of my own journey, as well as an invitation to you. I believe very deeply that we all have a story to share. In fact, probably multiple stories. I also believe that the act of sharing our stories with each other is one of the most powerful available to us. In a world that tells us to be quiet, that in 1,000 ways denigrates our worth and our value, getting up here and owning your voice is simply liberating. Thank you. But it's not just those external voices that silence us, is it? I had internalized that message, that I had nothing to share. And I'd internalized it so deeply that I silenced myself. As I said, I didn't think I had anything worth sharing. I didn't think I was worthy of people listening to me. I didn't think I was interesting. I silenced myself. I do have a voice, and I'm proud and delighted to use it. And I invite you to use yours as well. If this seems scary to you, you are not alone. This is my 10th story, and I still had nerves, okay? I doubt there are very many of us who've been on the stage, except maybe Kat. She seems to always be cool as a cucumber. Who do not or have not felt anxious getting up here. But if you're interested, if you're even like, maybe, talk to me or talk to any of the board members. We'll help you. We'll support you. You're not alone in this, because your voice is worth being heard. And I hope you'll claim your power and use it. And maybe, just maybe, this stage will be the starting point for things you never imagined. Maybe tonight will be your butterfly moment. Thank you.